Question 1. The audit findings indicate that the Informix 1170 database server is experiencing intermittent data inconsistencies during periods of high concurrent user activity, raising concerns about transaction isolation and data integrity. Which of the following actions is the most appropriate first step to address these findings? Option A. Classify the audit findings as low priority, assuming the inconsistencies are minor and do not impact critical business operations. Option B. Reduce the size of the transaction log files to free up disk space and potentially improve I/O performance. Option C. Disable transaction logging for the database to reduce overhead and improve performance during peak loads. Option D. Review and adjust the transaction isolation levels configured for the database and its applications to ensure they meet the application's data consistency requirements. The correct answer is D. Review and adjust the transaction isolation levels configured for the database and its applications to ensure they meet the application's data consistency requirements. Explanation. The audit findings indicate a potential data integrity issue within the Informix 1170 database, specifically concerning the handling of concurrent transactions and the potential for data corruption. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a deep understanding of Informix's transaction management mechanisms and the implications of incorrect configuration or usage on data reliability, which is a cornerstone of database administration and a key concern for regulatory compliance in data handling environments. The pressure to resolve the issue quickly without introducing further problems necessitates careful judgment. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the root cause of potential data integrity issues by ensuring proper transaction isolation levels are configured and understood. Informix 1170, like other relational database systems, relies on transaction isolation to prevent anomalies like dirty reads, non-repeatable reads, and phantom reads. By selecting an appropriate isolation level, e.g., read committed or serializable, depending on application needs and performance trade-offs, the database ensures that concurrent transactions do not interfere with each other in a way that compromises data accuracy. This aligns with general principles of data governance and, in regulated industries, can be critical for meeting audit requirements and demonstrating due diligence in data management. An incorrect approach involving disabling logging or reducing transaction log sizes would be a severe regulatory and ethical failure. Disabling logging, e.g., using set logging off, fundamentally undermines data recoverability. In the event of a system failure, all committed transactions, since the last backup, would be lost, leading to catastrophic data loss. This directly violates principles of data integrity and availability, which are often mandated by industry regulations and ethical standards for data custodians. Reducing transaction log sizes without a thorough understanding of transaction volume and recovery needs can lead to transaction failures and data corruption if the logs fill up during critical operations, again compromising data integrity. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the audit findings due to perceived low impact, represents a failure in professional responsibility and risk management. It demonstrates a disregard for potential data integrity issues, which can have significant financial, legal, and reputational consequences, and would likely be viewed as a breach of professional duty by any governing body or employer. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a systematic approach. First, thoroughly understanding the audit findings and the specific Informix 1170 features implicated. Second, consulting the official Informix 1170 documentation and best practice guides to understand the implications of different configurations. Third, assessing the application's requirements for data consistency and transaction isolation. Fourth, developing a remediation plan that prioritizes data integrity and recoverability, testing any proposed changes in a non-production environment before implementing them. Finally, documenting all actions taken and the rationale behind them for future reference and audit purposes. Question 2. Governance review demonstrates that end users are reporting significant delays in application response times, directly impacting critical business processes. The Informix 1170 database server is suspected to be the bottleneck. What is the most professional and effective initial course of action to diagnose and resolve this performance issue? Option A. Escalate the issue directly to the database vendor's support team, requesting an immediate remote session to diagnose the problem. Option B. Conduct a thorough analysis of Informix system logs, performance monitoring tools, and query execution plans to identify specific resource constraints or inefficient queries. Option C. Initiate a full database backup and then restart the Informix database server to clear any potential transient issues. Option D. Immediately begin modifying key Informix configuration parameters, such as shared memory settings and buffer pool sizes, based on general performance tuning guidelines. Correct answer is C. Initiate a full database backup and then restart the Informix database server to clear any potential transient issues. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in database administration where performance degradation impacts critical business operations. The professional must balance the urgency of resolving the issue with the need to maintain data integrity and adhere to established operational procedures. The challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the performance issue without introducing further instability or violating data governance policies. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic investigation of the Informix 1170 database environment. This includes analyzing system logs, performance metrics, such as CPU, memory, I/O utilization, and query execution plans. The focus should be on identifying specific SQL statements or database configurations that are contributing to the slowdown. This methodical approach ensures that the problem is addressed at its source, minimizing the risk of unintended consequences. Adhering to established change management procedures, which would typically involve testing potential solutions in a non-production environment before applying them to production, is crucial for maintaining data integrity and system stability, aligning with fundamental database administration best practices and the principles of responsible data management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach would be to immediately restart the Informix database server without a thorough investigation. This is a reactive measure that might temporarily alleviate the symptoms, but does not address the underlying cause. It risks data loss or corruption if the restart is not handled properly, especially if transactions are in progress. Furthermore, it bypasses the diagnostic process, making it difficult to prevent recurrence and violating the principle of systematic problem solving. Another incorrect approach would be to arbitrarily tune database configuration parameters without understanding their impact. Informix 1170 has numerous configuration settings, and misconfiguration can lead to severe performance issues or system instability. This approach lacks a data-driven basis and could exacerbate the problem, demonstrating a failure to apply professional judgment and a disregard for the potential negative consequences on data availability and integrity. A third incorrect approach would be to immediately escalate the issue to senior management without performing any initial diagnostics. While escalation is sometimes necessary, doing so without any preliminary investigation shows a lack of initiative and professional responsibility. It places an undue burden on management and delays the resolution process by not leveraging the administrator's expertise to gather initial information. This approach fails to demonstrate due diligence in problem resolution. Professional reasoning. Professionals should approach performance issues by first gathering information through systematic monitoring and analysis of the database environment. This includes reviewing logs, performance metrics, and query performance. Based on this analysis, potential root causes can be identified. Next, a hypothesis should be formed, and potential solutions should be developed and tested in a controlled environment, e.g., a development or staging instance, to assess their impact. Only after successful testing should changes be applied to the production environment, following a documented change management process. This iterative, data-driven, and controlled approach ensures that solutions are effective, minimize risk, and maintain the integrity and availability of the data. Question 3. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive understanding of how to manage Informix 1170 databases in a manner that aligns with regulatory mandates. When designing a new Informix 1170 environment intended to store sensitive customer data, which of the following approaches best ensures compliance with applicable regulations? Option A. Proactively consult with legal and compliance officers to understand specific regulatory requirements and integrate them into the database design, security policies, and data handling procedures from the outset. Option B. Prioritize achieving optimal database performance and defer detailed regulatory compliance checks until after the system is fully operational. Option C. Rely solely on industry-standard technical best practices for database administration, assuming these implicitly satisfy all regulatory needs. Option D. Implement standard Informix 1170 security features and assume they meet all regulatory obligations without further verification. The correct answer is A. Proactively consult with legal and compliance officers to understand specific regulatory requirements and integrate them into the database design, security policies, and data handling procedures from the outset. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the technical requirements of Informix database administration with the overarching need for regulatory compliance. The challenge lies in ensuring that database operations, particularly those involving data handling and access, adhere to the specific regulations governing the industry and jurisdiction. Careful judgment is required to interpret and apply these regulations to the practicalities of database management, avoiding both overcompliance that hinders efficiency and undercompliance that exposes the organization to significant risks. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it proactively integrates regulatory considerations into the strategic planning for Informix 1170. This ensures that security measures, data retention policies, and access controls are designed from the outset to meet compliance mandates. Specifically, by consulting with legal and compliance officers, the DBA ensures that the implementation aligns with the spirit and letter of relevant regulations, such as those pertaining to data privacy and integrity. This proactive stance minimizes the likelihood of costly remediation efforts and reputational damage. An incorrect approach that involves implementing security measures solely based on technical best practices without explicit consideration of regulatory requirements is professionally unacceptable. This failure stems from a lack of understanding of the organization's legal obligations, potentially leading to noncompliance with data protection laws or industry-specific mandates. Another incorrect approach, which prioritizes database performance above all else and defers regulatory checks to a later stage, is also flawed. This reactive approach increases the risk of discovering compliance gaps late in the development or operational lifecycle, making remediation more complex and expensive, and potentially exposing the organization to penalties. A third incorrect approach, which assumes that standard Informix features are inherently compliant without verification, ignores the nuances of regulatory interpretation and the specific context of the organization's data usage. Professionals should adopt a decision-making framework that begins with understanding the regulatory landscape relevant to their industry and jurisdiction. This understanding should then inform the technical design and implementation of database systems. Collaboration with legal, compliance, and security teams is crucial throughout the planning and execution phases. Regular reviews and audits should be conducted to ensure ongoing adherence to both technical standards and regulatory requirements. Question 4. Investigation of a sudden and significant performance degradation in an Informix 1170 database, which stores sensitive customer financial data, requires a methodical approach. Given the strict regulatory environment governing financial data in this jurisdiction, what is the most appropriate initial course of action to diagnose and resolve the performance issue while ensuring compliance? Option A. Immediately apply aggressive database optimization scripts and increase system resource allocation to expedite performance recovery. Option B. Review Informix 1170 database audit logs and security configurations against established data protection policies and access control guidelines. Option C. Consult online forums and third-party performance tuning guides for quick fixes without cross-referencing regulatory requirements. Option D. Focus solely on hardware diagnostics and network latency checks, assuming the database configuration is inherently secure. Correct answer is B. Review Informix 1170 database audit logs and security configurations against established data protection policies and access control guidelines. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a professional challenge due to the inherent tension between operational efficiency and regulatory adherence when dealing with sensitive data within an Informix 1170 C2090 database. The need to quickly resolve performance issues must be balanced against the strict requirements of data privacy and security regulations. Misinterpreting or overlooking these regulations can lead to severe consequences, including legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The complexity arises from understanding how database operations, even seemingly minor ones, can intersect with regulatory mandates. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a thorough review of the Informix 1170 database configuration and access logs, specifically looking for any deviations from established security policies and data handling procedures that might be contributing to performance degradation. This approach is best professional practice because it directly addresses the root cause of the performance issue while remaining compliant with regulatory frameworks governing data protection and access. By examining logs and configurations against documented policies, a professional can identify whether unauthorized access, improper data handling, or configuration errors are impacting performance, thereby ensuring that any remediation steps are both effective and legally sound. This aligns with the principle of due diligence in data management. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately implementing aggressive performance tuning techniques, such as disabling security features or increasing user privileges without proper authorization or impact assessment. This is a regulatory failure because it bypasses established security protocols designed to protect sensitive data, potentially violating data privacy laws. It also represents an ethical failure by prioritizing speed over security and compliance. Another incorrect approach is to ignore the performance issue, hoping it resolves itself, or attributing it solely to hardware limitations without investigating the database itself. This is a failure of professional responsibility and can lead to regulatory noncompliance if the underlying cause is related to data handling or security breaches that are not being addressed. It also fails to uphold the duty to maintain system integrity and performance. A third incorrect approach is to consult external, non-vetted resources for solutions without verifying their compliance with the specific regulatory environment governing the data. This is a significant risk, as generic advice may not account for the unique legal and regulatory obligations, leading to inadvertent breaches of data protection laws. Professional reasoning. Professionals must adopt a systematic approach that prioritizes understanding the regulatory landscape before implementing technical solutions. This involves 1. Identifying all applicable regulations and internal policies related to data handling, security, and access for the specific jurisdiction. 2. Thoroughly investigating the database environment, including configurations, access logs, and audit trails, to pinpoint the source of the performance issue. 3. Correlating any findings with regulatory requirements to ensure proposed solutions are compliant. 4. Documenting all steps taken, findings, and remediation efforts for auditability. 5. Seeking expert advice or legal counsel if there is any ambiguity regarding regulatory compliance. Question 5. What factors determine the appropriate configuration of Informix 1170 backup, archive, and retention policies to meet regulatory compliance requirements for data auditability and disposal? Option A. The performance impact of different backup schedules on the Informix database and the ease of restoring individual data records. Option B. The specific industry regulations governing data retention periods, the types of data stored, e.g., financial, personal, identifiable information, and the organization's internal audit requirements for data access history. Option C. The technical expertise of the database administration team in implementing complex Informix features and the vendor's recommended default settings for data archiving. Option D. The available disk space on the Informix server and the frequency of data modification by end users. Correct answer is B. The specific industry regulations governing data retention periods, the types of data stored, e.g., financial, personal, identifiable information, and the organization's internal audit requirements for data access history. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in database administration, ensuring data integrity and availability while adhering to regulatory requirements for data retention and auditability. The professional challenge lies in balancing the operational needs of the Informix 1170 database with the legal and compliance obligations that govern how data is stored, accessed, and disposed of. Misinterpreting or neglecting these requirements can lead to significant legal penalties, reputational damage, and loss of customer trust. The correct approach emphasizes a proactive and documented strategy for data lifecycle management within the Informix environment. This involves understanding the specific data types, their associated retention periods mandated by relevant regulations, e.g., financial transaction data, customer PII, and implementing appropriate Informix features and operational procedures to enforce these policies. This includes leveraging Informix's backup and restore capabilities for audit trails, employing archiving strategies for older data to manage storage efficiently while maintaining accessibility for compliance purposes, and establishing clear data destruction protocols that are auditable. This approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses regulatory mandates, minimizes risk, and ensures that the organization can meet its legal obligations regarding data. It demonstrates due diligence and a commitment to compliance, which are paramount in regulated industries. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on performance optimization without considering retention policies would be professionally unacceptable. This is because it fails to acknowledge or implement the necessary controls to comply with data retention laws. For instance, automatically purging old data without regard for legal requirements would constitute a direct violation, leading to potential fines and legal repercussions. Another incorrect approach might involve relying on ad hoc manual processes for data archiving and deletion. This is problematic as it is prone to human error, lacks auditability, and makes it difficult to consistently enforce retention policies across the entire database. Such an approach would fail to provide the necessary assurance to auditors or regulators that data is being managed in accordance with legal frameworks. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a thorough understanding of the applicable regulatory landscape, a detailed inventory of the data stored within the Informix database, and a clear definition of data retention and disposal policies. This should be followed by the selection and implementation of appropriate Informix features and operational procedures that align with these policies. Regular review and auditing of these processes are crucial to ensure ongoing compliance and to adapt to any changes in regulations or business requirements. Question 6. When evaluating the risk assessment process for an Informix 1170 database environment, which of the following strategies best aligns with proactive data integrity and availability management? Option A. Conducting a comprehensive vulnerability scan of the Informix server and its associated network infrastructure, followed by a prioritized implementation of security patches and configuration hardening based on identified critical and high-risk findings. Option B. Implementing a full system backup and restore test only when a critical system failure is imminent to verify data recoverability. Option C. Relying solely on the default security settings provided by Informix 1170 and assuming that vendor-provided configurations are inherently secure for all operational scenarios. Option D. Focusing risk assessment efforts exclusively on external threats, such as denial-of-service attacks, and neglecting potential internal risks like accidental data deletion by authorized users. The correct answer is A. Conducting a comprehensive vulnerability scan of the Informix server and its associated network infrastructure, followed by a prioritized implementation of security patches and configuration hardening based on identified critical and high-risk findings. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in database administration, balancing the need for robust risk assessment with the practical constraints of a production environment. The professional challenge lies in identifying and prioritizing potential risks to data integrity and availability without causing undue disruption or incurring excessive costs. Informix 1170, like any database system, has inherent vulnerabilities that must be understood and mitigated. The regulatory framework for this exam, C2090-558 Informix 1170 Fundamentals, implicitly requires adherence to best practices for data management and security, which are foundational to any compliance regime. The correct approach involves a systematic and layered strategy for risk assessment. This includes understanding the specific Informix 1170 features and configurations in use, identifying potential threats, e.g., hardware failure, software bugs, human error, malicious attacks, and assessing the likelihood and impact of each threat. This methodical process allows for the prioritization of mitigation efforts, focusing resources on the most critical risks. Best professional practice dictates a proactive stance, where potential issues are identified and addressed before they manifest as incidents. This aligns with the general principles of data governance and operational resilience expected in any regulated environment. An incorrect approach would be to ignore potential risks due to perceived lack of immediate impact or to implement security measures without a clear understanding of the underlying vulnerabilities. For instance, simply applying all available patches without assessing their compatibility or necessity could lead to unintended consequences, such as system instability or performance degradation. This reactive or haphazard approach fails to meet the standard of due diligence required for responsible database management. Ethically, it can be seen as a failure to protect the integrity and confidentiality of the data entrusted to the administrator. Another incorrect approach might be to solely rely on vendor documentation without considering the specific operational context and unique risk profile of the organization's Informix environment. This overlooks the fact that generic advice may not adequately address specific implementation challenges or threat landscapes. The professional decision-making process should involve a continuous cycle of identification, assessment, mitigation, and review of risks. This starts with a thorough understanding of the Informix 1170 architecture and its role within the organization's IT infrastructure. Next, potential threats and vulnerabilities should be cataloged, and their potential impact on business operations and data integrity evaluated. Mitigation strategies, ranging from backup and recovery procedures to access controls and security patching, should then be developed and implemented based on the assessed risk levels. Finally, regular reviews and updates to the risk assessment are crucial to adapt to evolving threats and changes in the database environment. Question 7. Risk assessment procedures indicate a critical vulnerability has been identified in a core Informix 1170 database component, potentially exposing sensitive customer data. The immediate business impact of downtime is extremely high. Which of the following actions best balances the urgency of the situation with robust risk management and compliance? Option A. Disable the affected database component until a permanent fix can be developed by the vendor, accepting the significant business downtime as a necessary security measure. Option B. Implement a temporary workaround by modifying application code to bypass the vulnerable component, deferring the vendor patch until the next scheduled maintenance window. Option C. Initiate a comprehensive root cause analysis. Engage security specialists to assess the full scope of the vulnerability and potential impact, and develop a phased remediation plan that includes thorough testing before full deployment. Option D. Immediately apply the vendor-supplied patch after a brief review of its release notes, prioritizing system restoration over extensive testing to minimize business disruption. Correct answer is D. Immediately apply the vendor-supplied patch after a brief review of its release notes, prioritizing system restoration over extensive testing to minimize business disruption. Explanation. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires balancing the immediate need for system availability with the long-term implications of security vulnerabilities. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to shortcuts that introduce significant risks. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen remediation strategy is both effective and compliant with established security protocols and data protection regulations. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough understanding of the root cause and potential impact before implementing a solution. This aligns with the principles of responsible data management and security, which are implicitly supported by general IT governance frameworks that emphasize due diligence and risk mitigation. By involving security experts and performing a comprehensive impact analysis, the team ensures that the fix addresses the vulnerability without creating new security holes or compromising data integrity. This proactive and systematic method minimizes the likelihood of future incidents and demonstrates a commitment to maintaining a secure and reliable system, which is a fundamental ethical obligation for IT professionals. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on a quick patch without understanding the vulnerability scope is professionally unacceptable. This could lead to a superficial fix that leaves the system exposed to further attacks, violating the duty of care to protect data and system integrity. Such an approach risks regulatory noncompliance if data breaches occur due to inadequate security measures. Another incorrect approach, which involves disabling the affected component entirely without considering its business criticality, is also professionally unsound. While it might seem like a decisive action, it can lead to significant business disruption and financial loss. This demonstrates a failure to adequately assess business impact, a key component of responsible IT management. It also fails to address the underlying vulnerability, leaving the system exposed once the component is eventually re-enabled. A third incorrect approach, which involves relying solely on vendor-provided patches without independent verification or testing, is risky. While vendors are responsible for their software, IT professionals have a responsibility to ensure that patches are appropriate for their specific environment and do not introduce unintended consequences. This can lead to system instability or security gaps if the patch is flawed or incompatible. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured risk assessment framework. This includes identifying the threat, assessing its likelihood and impact, evaluating existing controls, determining the residual risk, and then selecting and implementing appropriate mitigation strategies. Communication with stakeholders, including management and affected users, is crucial throughout the process. The decision should always be guided by the principle of least privilege and the goal of maintaining the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information systems and data. Question 8. Strategic planning requires a comprehensive understanding of potential threats to data integrity and system availability. When an Informix 1170 database experiences an unexpected performance degradation, potentially due to a newly discovered vulnerability, what is the most prudent initial step in the risk assessment process to ensure both system stability and data security? Option A. Conduct a detailed analysis of the performance degradation, correlating it with system logs and known exploit patterns, to identify the specific nature and scope of the potential vulnerability before implementing any remediation. Option B. Inform senior management of the performance issue and request guidance on how to proceed, prioritizing business continuity over immediate technical investigation. Option C. Immediately apply the latest available security patch to the Informix 1170 instance to mitigate any known vulnerabilities. Option D. Roll back the Informix 1170 database to a previous stable version to restore performance, deferring any security concerns until after normal operations are re-established. The correct answer is C. Immediately apply the latest available security patch to the Informix 1170 instance to mitigate any known vulnerabilities. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Informix database administrator must balance the immediate need for system availability with the long-term implications of security vulnerabilities. The pressure to restore service quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise risk assessment processes. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen remediation strategy is both effective in the short term and sustainable from a security and compliance perspective. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough risk assessment before implementing any changes. This aligns with general IT governance principles and, by extension, the spirit of regulatory frameworks that mandate due diligence in managing information systems. A systematic risk assessment allows for the identification of potential threats, vulnerabilities, and the impact of those threats on business operations and data integrity. By understanding the risks, the administrator can select the most appropriate mitigation strategy, which might involve patching, configuration changes, or even temporary workarounds, all chosen based on their risk reduction effectiveness and potential side effects. This proactive and informed decision-making process minimizes the likelihood of introducing new vulnerabilities or failing to address the root cause of the issue, thereby upholding professional responsibility. An incorrect approach that involves immediately applying a patch without understanding its full impact represents a regulatory and ethical failure. Such an action bypasses the critical step of risk assessment, potentially introducing new, unforeseen vulnerabilities or causing system instability. This could lead to a breach of data confidentiality, integrity, or availability, which in many jurisdictions would violate regulations concerning data protection and system security. Ethically, it demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to act in the best interest of the organization and its stakeholders. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the vulnerability to avoid downtime, is a severe regulatory and ethical failure. This directly contravenes the principle of maintaining a secure information system, It exposes the organization to significant risks, including data breaches, financial losses, and reputational damage. From a regulatory standpoint, knowingly leaving a system vulnerable can result in substantial penalties and legal liabilities, especially if sensitive data is compromised. It is ethically irresponsible as it prioritizes short-term convenience over the fundamental duty to protect organizational assets and data. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to incident response and change management. First, contain the incident and assess its immediate impact. Second, conduct a thorough risk assessment of the identified vulnerability, considering its exploitability, potential impact, and the likelihood of occurrence. Third, evaluate potential remediation options, weighing their effectiveness, cost, and potential side effects. Fourth, implement the chosen solution following established change control procedures, including testing and rollback plans. Finally, document the entire process, including the risk assessment findings and the rationale for the chosen remediation, for audit and future reference. This systematic process ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with professional standards and regulatory expectations. Question 9. Strategic planning requires a thorough understanding of potential vulnerabilities when considering the implementation of a new feature in an Informix 1170 database, which risk assessment approach best aligns with professional responsibilities for data integrity and operational continuity. Option A. Expedite the implementation of the new feature to demonstrate agility, deferring any detailed risk assessment until after the system is live and operational. Option B. Focus primarily on the technical novelty and complexity of the new feature, assuming that any issues will be minor and easily resolved post-implementation. Option C. Dismiss the need for a formal risk assessment, assuming that the feature is well tested by the vendor and therefore inherently safe for production use. Option D. Prioritize identifying scenarios where the new feature could lead to data corruption, and assess the impact of such corruption on business operations and regulatory compliance. The correct answer is D. Prioritize identifying scenarios where the new feature could lead to data corruption, and assess the impact of such corruption on business operations and regulatory compliance. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because the Informix database administrator is tasked with assessing the risk associated with a new feature's implementation without a clear, predefined risk assessment methodology or established regulatory guidance, specifically for this type of technical risk within the context of Informix 1170. The administrator must balance the potential benefits of the new feature against its potential negative impacts on data integrity, performance, and security, all while operating within the implicit or explicit requirements of their organization and any overarching data protection or operational resilience regulations that might apply, even if not explicitly detailed in the C2090-558 syllabus. The challenge lies in translating technical possibilities into business and regulatory risks. The correct approach, focusing on identifying potential data corruption scenarios and their impact on business operations and regulatory compliance, represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core responsibilities of a database administrator, ensuring data integrity and availability. This aligns with general principles of operational risk management and data governance, which are implicitly expected in any professional IT role. By proactively considering how the new feature might lead to data corruption, and then evaluating the business and regulatory consequences of such corruption, the administrator is performing a crucial risk assessment that supports informed decision-making and safeguards the organization. This proactive stance is essential for maintaining trust and meeting any implied compliance obligations related to data accuracy and business continuity. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on the technical complexity of the new feature without considering its impact on data or operations is professionally unacceptable because it neglects the fundamental purpose of a database system to reliably store and manage data for business use. This approach fails to identify potential risks that could lead to financial loss, reputational damage, or regulatory penalties. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes the speed of implementation over any form of risk evaluation is also professionally unsound. This haste can lead to overlooking critical vulnerabilities, directly contravening the principle of due diligence in IT management, and potentially violating implicit organizational policies or industry best practices regarding system changes. A third incorrect approach that dismisses the need for risk assessment due to the perceived low likelihood of issues is negligent. Professional practice demands that even low-probability, high-impact risks be considered and mitigated where feasible, especially when dealing with critical data systems. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a structured approach to risk assessment. First, understand the proposed change thoroughly. Second, brainstorm potential failure modes and their direct technical consequences. Third, translate these technical consequences into business impacts, e.g., downtime, incorrect reporting, data loss. Fourth, consider the regulatory and compliance implications of these business impacts. Fifth, evaluate the likelihood and severity of each identified risk. Finally, recommend appropriate mitigation strategies or accept the risk with full awareness of its potential consequences. This systematic process ensures that all relevant factors are considered, leading to robust and defensible decisions. Question 10. The performance metrics show a consistent increase in query response times and a rise in disk-I/O operations over the past week for an Informix 1170 database. Which of the following approaches best addresses the potential risks associated with these observations? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities that could be causing the performance degradation. Evaluate their likelihood and impact, and then prioritize mitigation strategies. Option B. Focus solely on increasing hardware resources, such as adding more RAM and faster storage, to alleviate the performance bottlenecks. Option C. Assume the performance issues are temporary and will resolve themselves, and continue monitoring without immediate intervention. Option D. Immediately implement aggressive query optimization techniques and add new indexes to all tables experiencing slow response time to improve performance. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive risk assessment to identify potential threats and vulnerabilities that could be causing the performance degradation, evaluate their likelihood and impact, and then prioritize mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for efficient database operations with the imperative to maintain data integrity and security, all within the context of Informix 1170 fundamentals. The performance metrics, while indicating potential issues, do not inherently pinpoint the root cause. A hasty decision based solely on observed performance degradation could lead to incorrect troubleshooting, wasted resources, and potentially introduce new vulnerabilities or data corruption. The core of the challenge lies in applying a systematic risk assessment methodology to identify and mitigate potential threats to the database's availability, integrity, and confidentiality. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a structured and evidence-based risk assessment. By first identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities related to the observed performance metrics, and then evaluating the likelihood and impact of these risks, a database administrator can make informed decisions about mitigation strategies. This aligns with fundamental principles of IT governance and risk management, which emphasize proactive identification and control of risks. In the context of Informix 1170, this would involve considering factors like query optimization, indexing strategies, hardware resource utilization, and potential security breaches that could manifest as performance issues. The regulatory framework for data management, while not explicitly detailed here, generally mandates due diligence in protecting data and ensuring system reliability, which a systematic risk assessment directly supports. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on immediate performance tuning, without understanding the underlying risks, is professionally unacceptable. For instance, blindly applying index changes or query rewrites without assessing their potential impact on data integrity or security could lead to unintended consequences. This could violate ethical obligations to maintain system stability and data accuracy. Furthermore, if the performance degradation is a symptom of a security vulnerability, ignoring this aspect and focusing only on performance would represent a failure to uphold data confidentiality and integrity, potentially leading to regulatory noncompliance if data protection laws are applicable. Another incorrect approach might be to dismiss the performance metrics as transient noise without proper investigation. This demonstrates a lack of due diligence and a failure to proactively manage potential risks, which could result in significant data loss or system downtime if the issue escalates. The professional decision-making process for similar situations should involve a cyclical approach. 1. Observe and document the symptoms' performance metrics. 2. Identify potential causes and associated risks, threats, and vulnerabilities. 3. Assess the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. 4. Prioritize risks based on their severity. 5. Develop and implement mitigation strategies, considering their potential side effects. 6. Monitor the effectiveness of the implemented strategies and reassess risks. This systematic process ensures that actions taken are targeted, effective, and minimize the introduction of new problems. Question 11. Compliance review shows that the database administration team responsible for an Informix 1170 environment has been tasked with conducting a risk assessment. Which of the following methodologies would best align with the principles of a comprehensive and effective risk assessment for this database system? Option A. Focusing exclusively on optimizing database performance metrics and tuning parameters, assuming that a well-performing system is inherently secure. Option B. Systematically identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to Informix 1170, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and then developing targeted mitigation strategies. Option C. Applying a generic set of IT risk categories without considering the specific architecture, features, or common operational challenges of Informix 1170. Option D. Prioritizing the assessment of only the most obscure and technically challenging potential security exploits, while overlooking common or easily preventable issues. The correct answer is B. Systematically identifying potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to Informix 1170, evaluating their likelihood and impact, and then developing targeted mitigation strategies. Explanation. This scenario presents a professional challenge because it requires balancing the need for robust risk assessment with the practical constraints of a real-world Informix database environment. The challenge lies in identifying and prioritizing risks that are both significant and actionable within the context of Informix 1170's capabilities and common operational practices. Careful judgment is required to avoid either over-engineering the risk assessment process, leading to inefficiency, or underestimating potential threats, leaving the system vulnerable. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it directly addresses the core principles of risk assessment as applied to database systems. It involves a systematic identification of potential threats and vulnerabilities specific to Informix 1170, followed by an evaluation of their likelihood and impact. This leads to the development of appropriate mitigation strategies, aligning with the fundamental goal of protecting data integrity and availability. This aligns with general IT security best practices and the implicit regulatory expectation of due diligence in managing information assets. An incorrect approach that focuses solely on performance tuning without considering security risks fails to meet the fundamental requirements of a comprehensive risk assessment. This represents a regulatory and ethical failure because it neglects potential data breaches, unauthorized access, or data corruption, which could have severe consequences and violate data protection principles. Another incorrect approach that prioritizes only the most technically complex risks, ignoring simpler but potentially more probable threats, is also professionally unacceptable. This is a failure because it demonstrates a lack of balanced judgment and an incomplete understanding of risk management. It can lead to resources being misallocated, leaving the system exposed to common and easily exploitable vulnerabilities. A third incorrect approach that relies on generic, non-specific risk categories without tailoring them to the Informix 1170 environment is inadequate. This is a failure because it lacks the specificity needed for effective mitigation. Without understanding the unique characteristics and potential weaknesses of Informix 1170, any risk assessment will be superficial and unlikely to identify critical vulnerabilities. The professional reasoning framework for similar situations involves a structured, iterative process. First, clearly define the scope of the assessment, focusing on the specific Informix 1170 environment. Second, identify potential threats and vulnerabilities relevant to database systems, considering both technical and operational aspects. Third, analyze the likelihood and impact of each identified risk. Fourth, prioritize risks based on this analysis. Fifth, develop and implement appropriate mitigation strategies, Finally, establish a process for ongoing monitoring and review of risks. This systematic approach ensures that risk assessment is thorough, relevant, and effective in protecting the database. Question 12. The monitoring system demonstrates a consistent increase in query execution times for critical reporting functions within the Informix 1170 database. Which of the following approaches best addresses this performance degradation while adhering to professional best practices for database management? Option A. Disable logging for all tables to reduce write overhead, assuming that the increased execution times are solely due to logging activity. Option B. Immediately upgrade the server hardware, including CPU and RAM, to accommodate the perceived increased workload without further investigation into the database's internal performance metrics. Option C. Analyze Informix 1170 execution plans for slow queries, review buffer pool configuration, and assess I/O subsystem performance to identify specific bottlenecks before implementing tuning strategies. Option D. Randomly adjust various Informix 1170 configuration parameters, such as DB buffers and C2090, in an attempt to find a configuration that improves performance through trial and error. The correct answer is C. Analyze Informix 1170 execution plans for slow queries, review buffer pool configuration, and assess I/O subsystem performance to identify specific bottlenecks before implementing tuning strategies. Explanation. The monitoring system demonstrates a critical need for proactive performance tuning. The scenario is professionally challenging because it requires the database administrator to not only identify performance degradation, but also to understand the underlying causes and implement solutions that align with best practices and potential regulatory considerations for data integrity and availability. The pressure to resolve issues quickly without introducing new problems or violating established protocols necessitates a thorough and systematic approach. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it involves a systematic investigation of the Informix 1170 database's performance metrics, focusing on identifying specific bottlenecks such as inefficient query plans, inadequate buffer pool configurations, or excessive I/O. This aligns with the principle of maintaining system stability and performance, which is indirectly related to regulatory requirements for data accessibility and reliability. By analyzing execution plans and resource utilization, the administrator can make informed decisions about index optimization, query rewriting, or configuration adjustments, ensuring that the database operates efficiently and meets service-level agreements. This methodical approach minimizes the risk of unintended consequences and demonstrates due diligence in system management. An incorrect approach that involves immediately increasing hardware resources without diagnosing the root cause is professionally unacceptable. This bypasses the fundamental responsibility of performance tuning and can lead to unnecessary expenditure and masking of underlying software or query inefficiencies. From a regulatory perspective, while not directly violating a specific data handling law, it fails to uphold the principle of responsible resource management and could indirectly impact compliance if the underlying performance issues lead to data access delays or system instability that affects reporting or operational continuity. Another incorrect approach, such as randomly altering configuration parameters without understanding their impact, is highly risky. This demonstrates a lack of technical expertise and a disregard for system stability. Such actions could lead to severe performance degradation, data corruption, or system outages, which would have significant regulatory implications concerning data integrity and availability. This approach is the antithesis of professional practice and could result in breaches of service-level agreements and potential non-compliance with data governance policies. Professional reasoning process for similar situation should involve a structured problem-solving methodology. First, clearly define the observed problem, e.g., slow query response times. Second, gather relevant data from monitoring tools, focusing on key performance indicators for Informix 1170. Third, analyze the data to identify potential root causes, considering query performance, system configuration, and resource utilization. Fourth, develop a plan of action, prioritizing solutions that address the identified root causes and have the least potential for negative impact. Fifth, implement the changes in a controlled environment or during a maintenance window if possible, and monitor the results closely. Finally, document the process, the changes made, and the outcomes. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are data-driven, effective, and professionally sound. Question 13. Cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing a new feature in Informix 11.70 can significantly improve query performance for critical reporting functions. However, this feature introduces a new layer of complexity to the database schema and has potential, though unconfirmed, security implications. Which approach best aligns with professional best practices for database management and regulatory compliance? Option A. Implement the new feature in a controlled pilot environment, conduct thorough security audits and performance testing, and then proceed with a phased rollout if successful. Option B. Defer the implementation indefinitely due to the unconfirmed security implications, prioritizing absolute security over potential performance gains. Option C. Immediately deploy the new feature across all production environments to realize the performance benefits as quickly as possible, relying on existing security protocols. Option D. Implement the feature only for non-critical reporting functions initially, monitoring performance and security in a limited scope before considering broader deployment. The correct answer is C. Immediately deploy the new feature across all production environments to realize the performance benefits as quickly as possible, relying on existing security protocols. Explanation. This scenario presents a common challenge in database management, balancing the immediate benefits of a new feature against potential long-term risks and compliance implications. The professional challenge lies in evaluating the best practice for implementing a feature that, while offering performance gains, introduces complexity and potential security vulnerabilities. Careful judgment is required to ensure that the chosen approach aligns with both technical efficiency and the overarching regulatory framework governing data handling. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a thorough, risk-aware evaluation before full implementation. This aligns with the principles of responsible data stewardship and adherence to regulatory guidelines that often mandate due diligence in adopting new technologies. By conducting a pilot program and comprehensive security audits, the team demonstrates a commitment to understanding the full impact of the change, minimizing potential data breaches or compliance violations, and ensuring that the chosen solution is robust and secure. This proactive stance is crucial in maintaining data integrity and trust. An incorrect approach that bypasses thorough testing and security reviews would represent a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such an approach disregards the potential for unintended consequences, such as exposing sensitive data or violating data privacy regulations. For instance, failing to conduct a pilot program could lead to widespread performance issues or security flaws that are difficult and costly to rectify, potentially resulting in fines or reputational damage. Similarly, neglecting security audits directly contravenes best practices for data protection and could lead to breaches that violate data protection laws. Another incorrect approach, focusing solely on the immediate cost savings without considering the long-term operational and security overhead, demonstrates a lack of foresight and a failure to uphold professional responsibility for maintaining a secure and compliant data environment. Professionals should employ a decision-making framework that begins with a clear understanding of the business need and the proposed solution's benefits. This should be followed by a comprehensive risk assessment, considering technical, security, and regulatory implications. A phased implementation, including pilot testing and thorough validation, is essential. Finally, ongoing monitoring and evaluation are critical to ensure the solution remains effective and compliant. This structured approach ensures that decisions are informed, responsible, and aligned with professional ethics and regulatory requirements. Question 14. The audit findings indicate that several Informix 11.70 database servers have been configured with overly permissive user access controls, potentially exposing sensitive data to unauthorized modification or disclosure. The audit report specifically highlights the use of shared user accounts and insufficient granular privilege assignment. Which of the following represents the most appropriate and professional approach to address these audit findings? Option A. Escalate the issue to senior management and request a complete overhaul of the database security policy, deferring any immediate remediation until a new policy is approved and implemented. Option B. Conduct a detailed review of each affected Informix 11.70 70 server to identify specific user accounts and privileges that violate the principle of least privilege. Then implement targeted changes to enforce granular access controls and eliminate shared accounts where appropriate, documenting all modifications. Option C. Revert all security configurations on the affected Informix 11. 70 servers to their default settings to ensure a baseline level of security is re-established. Option D. Immediately disable all user accounts that are not explicitly required for system administration to prevent any potential unauthorized access without further investigation into the specific audit findings. The correct answer is B. Conduct a detailed review of each affected Informix 11. 70 server to identify specific user accounts and privileges that violate the principle of least privilege, then implement targeted changes to enforce granular access controls and eliminate shared accounts where appropriate, documenting all modifications. Explanation: the audit findings indicate a potential deviation from best practices in managing Informix 11. 70 database security configurations. This scenario is professionally challenging because it requires a deep understanding of Informix security features, the potential impact of misconfigurations on data integrity and compliance, and the ability to translate audit observations into actionable remediation strategies. The core challenge lies in balancing operational efficiency with robust security controls, ensuring that security measures do not unduly impede legitimate database access or performance while still meeting regulatory requirements. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic and evidence-based remediation process. This involves a thorough review of the specific audit findings, cross-referencing them with the Informix 11. 70 security documentation and relevant industry best practices for database security. The focus on understanding the root cause of the misconfiguration, assessing the actual risk posed, and then implementing targeted, documented changes demonstrates a commitment to data protection and system integrity. This aligns with the general principles of IT governance and risk management, which are often implicitly or explicitly supported by regulatory frameworks that mandate secure data handling. An incorrect approach that involves immediately reverting all security settings to default without understanding the specific audit findings or the impact of those defaults is professionally unacceptable. This action fails to address the root cause of the problem and could inadvertently weaken security in other areas or disrupt critical database operations. It demonstrates a lack of analytical rigor and a reactive rather than proactive security posture. Another incorrect approach, such as ignoring the audit findings due to perceived low impact, represents a significant ethical and professional failure. This disregard for audit recommendations can lead to unaddressed vulnerabilities, potential data breaches, and non-compliance with data protection regulations, ultimately exposing the organization to legal and reputational damage. A third incorrect approach, which is to implement a blanket security policy across all databases without considering the unique requirements of each, is also flawed. This one-size-fits-all method can lead to over-securitization in some areas, impacting performance, and under-securitization in others, leaving critical data exposed. It lacks the nuanced understanding required for effective database security management. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve 1. Thoroughly understanding the audit findings and their context. 2. Consulting official Informix 11, 70 documentation and relevant security standards. 3. Assessing the risk associated with the identified misconfigurations. 4. Developing a remediation plan that addresses the root cause and is proportionate to the risk. 5. Implementing changes in a controlled manner with proper testing and documentation. 6. Verifying the effectiveness of the implemented changes. Question 15. Stakeholder feedback indicates a significant slowdown in application response times, with users reporting delays when accessing critical data managed by the Informix 11, 70 database. Initial investigations suggest the issue is database-related, but the exact cause is unclear. What is the most professional and effective approach to diagnose and resolve this performance degradation? Option A. Conduct a comprehensive performance analysis of the Informix 11, 70 database, focusing on identifying inefficient SQL statements, analyzing query execution plans, and reviewing relevant configuration parameters to pinpoint the root cause of the slowdown. Option B. proceed with a series of random adjustments to various Informix 1170 configuration parameters, hoping to stumble upon a setting that improves performance without a clear understanding of their interdependencies. Option C. Immediately allocate additional hardware resources, such as increasing CPU cores and RAM, to the server hosting the Informix 1170 database, assuming that increased capacity will resolve the performance issues. Option D. Prioritize rewriting application code that interacts with the database, assuming that the application logic is the sole contributor to the reported performance problems, and deferring any direct database-level investigation. The correct answer is A. Conduct a comprehensive performance analysis of the Informix 1170 database, focusing on identifying inefficient SQL statements, analyzing query execution plans, and reviewing relevant configuration parameters to pinpoint the root cause of the slowdown. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common challenge in database administration, where performance degradation impacts user experience and business operations. The professional challenge lies in identifying the root cause of the performance issue within the Informix 1170 environment and implementing a solution that is both effective and compliant with best practices, without introducing new risks or violating established guidelines. The need to balance immediate resolution with long-term system stability and data integrity is paramount. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a systematic, data-driven investigation of the Informix 1170 database performance. This includes analyzing system metrics, query execution plans, and configuration parameters. The focus on identifying specific SQL statements causing contention or inefficient resource utilization, and then optimizing those statements or their execution plans, directly addresses the reported performance issues. This aligns with best practices for database performance tuning, emphasizing root cause analysis and targeted solutions. It also implicitly adheres to the principle of maintaining system stability and data integrity, as changes are made based on evidence and understanding of their impact. Incorrect approaches analysis. One incorrect approach involves immediately increasing hardware resources, e.g., CPU memory, without a thorough analysis of the database's internal workings. This is a costly and often ineffective solution if the underlying problem is inefficient queries or poor database design. It represents a failure to apply due diligence and a potential violation of responsible resource management principles. Another incorrect approach is to arbitrarily alter database configuration parameters without understanding their specific impact on Informix 1170. This can lead to unintended consequences, such as increased locking, buffer contention, or even data corruption, thereby compromising system stability and data integrity. This demonstrates a lack of technical expertise and a disregard for the potential negative ramifications. A third incorrect approach is to focus solely on application-level code changes without considering the database's role in the performance bottleneck. While application code can contribute to performance issues, ignoring the database's contribution, especially when performance degradation is reported in the database context, is an incomplete diagnostic process. This can lead to wasted effort on the wrong solutions and prolonged system downtime. Professional reasoning. Professionals should adopt a systematic problem-solving methodology. This involves 1. Clearly defining the problem and its impact. 2. Gathering relevant data and metrics from the system. 3. Analyzing the data to identify potential root causes. 4. Formulating hypotheses and testing them through controlled experiments or targeted changes. 5. Implementing the most effective solution based on evidence. 6. Monitoring the system post-implementation to ensure the issue is resolved and no new problems have arisen. This structured approach ensures that solutions are well-reasoned, effective, and minimize risk. Question 16. Compliance review shows that a critical Informix 1170 database is experiencing significant performance degradation, impacting application response times. The database administrator has identified several potential tuning parameters that could address the issue. What is the most professionally responsible and compliant approach to implementing these changes? Option A. Immediately revert to a previous stable configuration of the database server and then investigate the performance issue offline, without making any changes to the current production system. Option B. Develop a comprehensive plan to test the proposed tuning parameters in a staging environment that mirrors production, including performance benchmarks and a detailed rollback strategy, before proposing the changes for production deployment. Option C. Implement the identified tuning parameters directly in the production environment during a scheduled maintenance window, after consulting with the application team. Option D. Apply the tuning parameters that are commonly recommended for similar performance issues in online forums and documentation, assuming they will resolve the problem without extensive testing. The correct answer is C. Implement the identified tuning parameters directly in the production environment during a scheduled maintenance window, after consulting with the application team. Explanation: this scenario presents a common challenge in database administration, balancing performance optimization with data integrity and adherence to established operational procedures. The professional challenge lies in identifying the most effective and compliant method to address a performance degradation issue without introducing new risks or violating established guidelines. Careful judgment is required to select an approach that is both technically sound and aligns with the organization's risk appetite and regulatory obligations, even if not explicitly detailed in the Informix 1170 Fundamentals exam syllabus. The underlying principles of data management and operational best practices are universally applicable. The correct approach represents best professional practice because it prioritizes a systematic, documented, and controlled method for performance tuning. This involves thorough analysis, testing in a non-production environment, and a rollback plan. This aligns with general IT governance principles that emphasize risk mitigation, change management, and auditability, while the Informix 1170 Fundamentals exam focuses on technical aspects. Professional practice dictates that technical solutions must be implemented within a robust operational framework. This framework ensures that changes are predictable, reversible, and do not negatively impact other critical systems or data. An incorrect approach that bypasses standard change control procedures and directly modifies production configurations without prior testing or rollback planning represents a significant regulatory and ethical failure. Such actions introduce an unacceptable level of risk, potentially leading to data corruption, extended downtime, and non-compliance with internal policies and potentially external regulations concerning data availability and integrity. This lack of due diligence can result in reputational damage and financial penalties. Another incorrect approach that involves implementing a quick fix without understanding the root cause is also professionally unacceptable. This is a reactive rather than proactive measure. It may temporarily alleviate the symptom, but does not address the underlying issue, which is likely to re-emerge and potentially worsen. This demonstrates a lack of thoroughness and a failure to apply systematic problem solving, which is a cornerstone of professional database management. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a structured approach. 1. Problem identification and scoping. Clearly define the performance issue and its impact. 2. Root cause analysis. Investigate to understand why the performance degradation is occurring. 3. Solution generation. Brainstorm potential solutions, considering technical feasibility, risks, and compliance. 4. Risk assessment and mitigation. Evaluate the risks associated with each potential solution and develop mitigation strategies. 5. Testing and validation. Test the chosen solution in a controlled environment. 6. Change management. Follow established change control procedures for implementation. 7. Monitoring and verification. Monitor the system post-implementation to ensure the issue is resolved and no new problems have arisen. 8. Documentation. Document all steps taken, decisions made, and outcomes. Question 17. The evaluation methodology shows a need to assess the performance characteristics of a critical Informix 1170 database system under simulated peak load conditions. Which of the following approaches best balances the need for accurate performance data with the imperative to maintain uninterrupted business operations and data integrity? Option A. Utilize a dedicated, isolated testing environment that is a close replica of the production Informix 1170 system, populated with a representative subset of production data to simulate realistic user load patterns. Option B. Conduct performance testing directly on the production Informix 1170 database during normal business hours to capture real-world usage patterns. Option C. Rely solely on user feedback and anecdotal reports of performance issues to identify areas requiring optimization in the Informix 1170 database. Option D. Perform performance testing on a significantly scaled down or differently configured Informix 1170 environment to expedite the testing process and reduce resource requirements. The correct answer is B. Conduct performance testing directly on the production Informix 1170 database during normal business hours to capture real-world usage patterns. Explanation. The evaluation methodology shows a critical juncture in assessing the performance and reliability of an Informix 1170 database system. The challenge lies in selecting an appropriate method to evaluate its performance under varying load conditions without disrupting ongoing critical business operations. This requires a nuanced understanding of performance testing techniques, their potential impact, and the regulatory environment governing data availability and integrity. The correct approach, which involves simulating realistic user load patterns using a controlled, non-production environment that mirrors the production setup as closely as possible, represents best professional practice. This aligns with industry standards for performance testing and implicitly supports regulatory requirements for system stability and data integrity. By isolating the testing to a replica environment, it minimizes the risk of data corruption or service interruption, thereby upholding the principle of least privilege and ensuring business continuity. This method allows for accurate performance metrics to be gathered without jeopardizing live operations, which is paramount in regulated industries where downtime can have significant financial and compliance repercussions. An incorrect approach would be to conduct performance testing directly on the production Informix 1170 database during peak business hours. This is professionally unacceptable because it directly violates the principle of least disruption and carries a high risk of impacting system availability and data integrity. Such an action could lead to regulatory non-compliance if the system is subject to service-level agreements, SLAs, or data availability mandates. It also demonstrates a failure to adhere to basic IT best practices for system maintenance and testing, potentially leading to data loss or corruption, which would have severe ethical and legal consequences. Another incorrect approach would be to rely solely on anecdotal feedback from users about perceived performance issues without conducting objective, measurable testing. This is professionally deficient, as it lacks the rigor required for effective system evaluation. Performance issues are often complex and require quantitative data to diagnose and resolve. Relying on subjective feedback can lead to misdiagnosis, wasted resources, and ultimately, a failure to address the root cause of performance degradation, potentially impacting compliance with performance-related regulations or internal policies. A further incorrect approach would be to use a testing environment that significantly deviates from the production Informix 1170 configuration, such as using hardware with substantially different specifications or a simplified data set. While this might seem like a way to speed up testing, it compromises the validity of the results. Performance metrics gathered in such an environment are unlikely to accurately reflect how the system will behave under real-world conditions. This can lead to flawed decision-making regarding system upgrades or tuning, potentially resulting in performance issues in production that were not predicted, thereby failing to meet expected service levels and potentially contravening regulatory expectations for system reliability. The professional reasoning process for similar situations should involve a risk-based assessment. First, clearly define the objectives of the performance evaluation. Second, identify potential testing methodologies and assess the associated risks to production systems, data integrity, and business operations. Third, prioritize methods that offer the highest fidelity of results with the lowest risk, often involving dedicated testing environments. Fourth, ensure all testing adheres to established change management procedures and internal policies. Finally, document all testing activities, results, and any remediation actions taken, ensuring transparency and auditability. Question 18. The efficiency study reveals that a key reporting query in an Informix 1170 database is consistently exceeding its acceptable execution time, impacting downstream business processes. The database administrator suspects that the current indexing strategy is suboptimal for the query's access patterns. What is the most professional and effective course of action to address this performance degradation? Option A. Increase the server's buffer pool size significantly. assuming that more memory will automatically resolve the query performance issue. Option B. Immediately add a composite index on all columns referenced in the queries where clause to ensure all potential filtering conditions are covered. Option C. Revert to a previous, known stable version of the database schema and data, hoping that the issue is related to recent, undocumented changes. Option D. Analyze the query's execution plan and data distribution statistics to identify potential indexing improvements or modifications. Test these changes in a development environment, and then implement them through a controlled change management process. The correct answer is D. Analyze the query's execution plan and data distribution statistics to identify potential indexing improvements or modifications. Test these changes in a development environment, and then implement them through a controlled change management process. Explanation. The efficiency study reveals a significant bottleneck in the data retrieval process for a critical reporting function within an Informix 1170 database. This scenario is professionally challenging because it directly impacts business operations and regulatory compliance. The pressure to resolve the performance issue quickly must be balanced against the need to implement a sustainable and compliant solution. A hasty, unverified fix could introduce new problems or violate data integrity principles, leading to inaccurate reports and potential regulatory scrutiny. The correct approach involves a systematic, evidence-based methodology for performance tuning. This includes thorough analysis of query execution plans, understanding data distribution, and considering appropriate indexing strategies. Implementing changes in a controlled environment, such as a development or staging instance, before deploying to production is crucial. This ensures that the proposed solution effectively addresses the bottleneck without introducing regressions or compromising data integrity. This aligns with best professional practices of due diligence, risk management, and adherence to established database administration principles, which implicitly support regulatory requirements for accurate and reliable data. An incorrect approach would be to blindly apply a generic performance tuning tip without understanding its specific impact on the existing workload and data structure. For example, adding an index without analyzing the query or data distribution might improve one query at the expense of others, or even degrade overall performance due to increased maintenance overhead. This demonstrates a lack of analytical rigor and could lead to a violation of implicit regulatory requirements for data accuracy and system reliability. Another incorrect approach would be to bypass standard change management procedures and implement a fix directly in production. This is a significant professional and ethical failure, as it introduces unacceptable risk of system downtime, data corruption, and noncompliance with internal controls and potentially external regulations governing data availability and integrity. It shows a disregard for established operational procedures and risk mitigation strategies. Professionals should approach such situations by first clearly defining the problem and its impact. Then, they should gather all relevant data, including performance metrics, query logs, and system configurations. Based on this analysis, potential solutions should be identified, evaluated for their risks and benefits, and tested thoroughly in a non-production environment. Finally, changes should be deployed following a documented and approved change management process, with rollback plans in place. This structured decision-making process ensures that solutions are effective, efficient, and compliant with professional standards and regulatory expectations. Question 19. Benchmark analysis indicates that a critical customer-facing application's query performance has degraded by 15% over the last quarter, impacting user experience and transaction processing times. A proposed solution involves implementing a new indexing strategy on several key tables. Given the tight deadline for resolution before the upcoming peak sales period, what is the most professional and responsible approach to implementing this indexing strategy? Option A. Develop and execute a comprehensive testing plan in a staging environment that mirrors production, validate performance improvements, and document all changes before deploying to production. Option B. Apply the indexing strategy to production based on successful results observed in a separate, less critical applications environment, assuming similar benefits will be realized. Option C. Postpone the implementation of the new indexing strategy until a less busy period, even if it means the application continues to operate with degraded performance during the peak sales period. Option D. Implement the new indexing strategy directly into the production environment immediately to address the performance degradation as quickly as possible. The correct answer is A. Develop and execute a comprehensive testing plan in a staging environment that mirrors production, validate performance improvements, and document all changes before deploying to production. Explanation: scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in database management, optimizing performance for a critical application under a tight deadline. The challenge lies in balancing the need for rapid deployment with the imperative to ensure data integrity, security, and compliance with established best practices. The pressure to deliver quickly can lead to shortcuts that compromise long-term stability and adherence to operational standards. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach prioritizes a phased, controlled implementation of the new indexing strategy. This involves thorough testing in a non-production environment that closely mirrors the production setup. This methodology ensures that the performance gains are validated, potential negative impacts on other operations are identified and mitigated, and the changes are documented according to internal policies and any relevant regulatory guidelines for database changes. This systematic approach aligns with principles of good database administration, risk management, and change control, which are implicitly expected in professional environments to maintain system reliability and prevent data loss or corruption. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the new indexing strategy directly in the production environment without prior testing is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It bypasses essential change control procedures, which are often mandated by internal policies and can be influenced by industry standards or regulatory requirements for system stability and auditability. This approach introduces an unacceptable level of risk, potentially leading to application downtime, data corruption, or performance degradation, all of which could have severe business and reputational consequences. It demonstrates a disregard for due diligence and professional responsibility. Applying the indexing strategy based solely on anecdotal evidence from a different, less critical system is also professionally unsound. While it might seem like a quick fix, it ignores the unique characteristics and workload of the production system. This lack of specific analysis and validation can lead to unintended consequences, such as increased locking contention, excessive I/O, or even slower query performance for certain operations. It fails to meet the standard of care expected in database management, where decisions should be data-driven and system-specific. Delaying the implementation indefinitely due to the perceived complexity of testing is an abdication of professional responsibility. While complexity is a factor, it does not excuse inaction when performance issues are impacting a critical application. Best professional practice dictates finding a manageable approach to testing and implementation, even if it requires breaking down the task into smaller, more achievable steps. This approach fails to address the business need and risks further performance degradation. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such implementation challenges should adopt a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Clearly defining the problem and its impact. 2. Identifying potential solutions and their associated risks and benefits. 3. Evaluating solutions against established best practices, internal policies, and any applicable regulatory frameworks. 4. Prioritizing solutions that offer a balance of effectiveness, risk mitigation, and adherence to standards. 5. Developing a detailed implementation plan that includes testing, rollback procedures, and monitoring. 6. Communicating the plan and its rationale to stakeholders. This systematic approach ensures that decisions are informed, defensible, and aligned with professional obligations. Question 20. Assessment of the most appropriate strategy for implementing a critical Informix 1170 database upgrade to a high-availability production environment, considering the need to minimize downtime and prevent data corruption. Option A. Executing the upgrade during the busiest operational hours to leverage maximum system load for immediate performance validation. Option B. Performing the upgrade without notifying or involving application owners and end users about the potential for temporary service interruptions. Option C. Direct implementation of the upgrade on the live production servers during a scheduled maintenance window without prior testing in a separate environment. Option D. A phased rollout approach, beginning with a comprehensive test in a staging environment that closely replicates production, followed by a gradual deployment to a subset of users, with a clearly defined and tested rollback plan in place. Correct answer is D. A phased rollout approach, beginning with a comprehensive test in a staging environment that closely replicates production, followed by a gradual deployment to a subset of users, with a clearly defined and tested rollback plan in place. Explanation. Scenario analysis. This scenario presents a common implementation challenge in database management, ensuring data integrity and availability during a critical system upgrade. The challenge lies in balancing the need for minimal downtime with the imperative to prevent data corruption or loss, which can have significant financial and reputational consequences. The pressure to complete the upgrade quickly, often driven by business demands, can lead to rushed decisions that overlook crucial validation steps. Professionals must exercise careful judgment to select an approach that mitigates risk without unduly delaying essential system improvements. Correct approach analysis. The correct approach involves a phased rollout with comprehensive testing and rollback capabilities. This strategy aligns with best professional practices by prioritizing data integrity and system stability. Specifically, it adheres to the principle of least privilege and defense in depth by isolating the impact of the upgrade to a subset of users or environments initially. Thorough testing in a staging environment that mirrors production allows for the identification and resolution of issues before they affect the live system. The inclusion of a well-defined rollback plan ensures that if unforeseen problems arise, the system can be quickly reverted to a stable state, minimizing disruption and data loss. This methodical approach is crucial for maintaining customer trust and adhering to implicit professional obligations of due care and diligence in managing critical IT infrastructure. Incorrect approaches analysis. Implementing the upgrade directly on the production environment without prior testing or a rollback plan is a significant regulatory and ethical failure. It violates the professional obligation to act with due care and skill, exposing the organization to unacceptable risks of data loss, corruption, and extended downtime. This approach demonstrates a disregard for established IT best practices and could lead to severe business disruption, financial penalties, and reputational damage. Performing the upgrade during a peak business period without adequate contingency planning is also professionally unacceptable. This demonstrates a lack of foresight and risk assessment, directly contradicting the professional duty to safeguard business operations. Such an action could lead to significant financial losses due to service interruption and negatively impact customer satisfaction, potentially leading to breaches of service-level agreements and regulatory scrutiny if data availability is compromised. Conducting the upgrade without involving key stakeholders or communicating the potential impact is another ethical lapse. It undermines collaborative decision-making and fails to manage expectations, which is essential for maintaining organizational harmony and ensuring business continuity. This oversight can lead to operational chaos and a lack of support if issues arise, further exacerbating the impact of any problems encountered during the upgrade. Professional reasoning. Professionals facing such implementation challenges should adopt a structured decision-making process. This involves 1. Thorough risk assessment. Identify potential failure points and their impact. 2. Evaluation of alternatives. Consider different implementation strategies, weighing their pros and cons against risk tolerance and business objectives. 3. Stakeholder consultation. Engage relevant parties to gather input and ensure alignment. 4. Planning for contingencies. Develop detailed rollback procedures and communication plans. 5. Phased implementation and testing. Prioritize incremental deployment and rigorous validation. By following this framework, professionals can make informed decisions that balance innovation with stability, ensuring compliance with implicit professional standards of responsibility and care.